Okay, well, it's 6 o'clock, everyone, and welcome to this joint meeting of the Finance and Personnel Committees. Bill, would you, I guess I'll call to order the meeting of the Finance Committee. And do we have Alder Nelson acting in the capacity of Personnel Committee Chair?
Yeah, I will call to order the Personnel Committee.
And Bill and Brian, would you do the roll calls, please?
For personnel, Nelson,
Here.
Jackson,
Here.
Cole.
Present. Okay,
For finance committee, Nairo,
here.
Lucas,
Here.
Jackson,
Here.
Mormon,
Here.
present.
All right, great. Well, I'm excited that this is the first meeting being held since we had our very informative training on parliamentary procedure last week. I know the Parks meeting was canceled, otherwise they would have been the first. So let's see how we do. I have my cheat sheet. I hope you all have yours. And one of the opportunities that we have to streamline our meetings and implement what we learned at our committee of the whole meeting is, instead of getting a motion and a second to approve the minutes, I will ask if there are any corrections to the minutes for either finance or personnel, if that's all right, Alder Nelson. And if anyone has any corrections they'd like to make to the minutes, please speak up. Hearing no suggested changes, I will approve the minutes for the Finance Committee.
And hearing no changes, I will approve the minutes for personnel.
Great. Moving on then to our miscellaneous item, we have a proposal, consideration for recommendation to the council, implement a cash in lieu option for employees not enrolling in the city's health insurance plan. Brian, would you like to give us a short briefing on this?
Absolutely. So this is a proposal to round out our health insurance benefits and our employee benefits. When we did the survey last fall, going into the change for vacation and personal days, we asked a number of different things. This was one of the highest rated things by current employees that they would like to see. It brings a bit of parity between those that are selecting health insurance, which we pay a substantial sum for both family and individual coverage, to those that don't have to take that and are carrying health insurance from other providers to any number of means. We took a look at what the most common plans are out there. I threw some questions out to my network, and about 75% of municipalities and governmental agencies and counties have some sort of cash in lieu program. This is modeled after the state and the UW system program. Both those programs offer a $2,000 cash in lieu of health insurance option for all of their employees. This would not start until open enrollment and January 1st of 2024. It would be incredibly difficult to administer for current employees. And it would be, if we didn't administer it for current employees in the middle of the year, it would be not consistent to offer to new employees coming and joining the organization at this point at the beginning of the year. But like I said, we had significant interest in this. I will tell you that every single new employee orientation I do, this is a question that comes up from new employees joining the organization. Is there an option for me to stay with my own health insurance or stay with my spouse's health insurance? And is there a cash in lieu? So there has been significant interest in this for the entire 3 years I've been with the city. It has not decreased. And we even had some employees when we did the survey last fall that indicated they were current plan members for our plan and would be interested in transitioning their coverage somewhere else in the cash in lieu, which potentially could offset some of the costs in initial implementation.
Thank you. Discussion, questions, comments from members of both committees? I have a few questions and comments. I really would like to see what some of the other requests were on the survey that you mentioned. I can see this being of big interest to the people who are able to take advantage of a benefit like this. But in my mind, this seems like a benefit that would be available mainly, if not exclusively, to married employees. And that's a bit troubling for me. You know, I'm also a little concerned because I know we've had discussions in the past about trying to offer some sort of paid parental leave, which I think would be of interest to a lot of employees, even those who have insurance elsewhere. And because of the Dobbs decision, I had brought up, and I'm pretty sure Mayor Kuhn would support, trying to figure out a way to provide travel assistance for employees and their family members who might need healthcare out of state. And so for that reason, I'm a little, I'm glad we would implement this in 2024, because it seems to me that gives us a little more time to think about this and consider other questions and, you know, potential concerns about this. I also note that we're going to be proclaiming Juneteenth later at the council agenda. And it occurred to me, well, that's a federal holiday. Would this money be well spent offering a city holiday on Juneteenth to all employees instead of a benefit that would benefit only a select group? Those are the concerns that I have. I guess I also had some questions about how it would be implemented. So the FAQs refer to employees demonstrating that they have other health plan coverage. I think I would want to see, if this does go forward, I would want to see that actually demonstrated and not just attested to by the employee, because we want to make sure our employees are in good health and have access to good health care. So unless my fellow members feel really passionately about moving this forward tonight, I think I really would like to see what the other high vote getters were on that survey, to see if maybe we're missing an opportunity to provide a benefit that would be available to more than just the 24 or so married employees.
Brian, what kind of timeline are you on as far as getting this in place in order for open enrollment?
We have all the mechanisms in place right now to turn this on for open enrollment. The language is sitting ready to activate with the provider. So all of those steps are completed. I just need approval by the council to turn it on. So all the groundwork for the implementation to include the application and how it integrates with our plan is done. We would want to have this discussion and complete this process in the next 2 months, so that when we go through our renewal process with SSM, that this is clearly indicated as part of our new plan going into the new year along with the renewal process. So if we don't pass it, if we don't act on it this meeting, then we should act on it at some point by the end of July.
Did you have more?
I was just going to say, I'm in support of passing it tonight, but I can understand that if another council person would want more information, I think that's fine.
I'm also in support of passing it tonight. In thinking about how it mostly benefits married couples, I'm not sure of that. I want some clarification on if somebody is a single person and would rather be in the marketplace with ACA. I think that this could help that person. If I was a single parent and with SSM, I do worry about their coverage of any childbearing aged woman. You have to go out of network to get any kind of birth control or DNC or whatever you need. And I do think that this would help that employee. And am I right about that?
It's my understanding, yes.
May I ask about the marketplace? Because it seems like that's specifically excluded. It says the alternative MEC cannot be coverage.
Marketplace itself is excluded. Other insurance beyond the marketplace would have the insurance thing.
And I did read through the FAQs, but why is the marketplace not covered in this?
Marketplace is not covered, and this is a part of statute that because we cannot provide an inducement for employees to not take an employee-sponsored plan,
Mhm.
and then the marketplace would bear that burden.
Gotcha. That's unfortunate, but I still am in favor of it. Anybody else have anything? Jeffrey? Anything?
I would comment,
Sorry, Jennifer.
oh,
Go ahead. Go ahead. Go ahead, David.
I would comment, I'm a state employee, 18 years. So I've navigated these waters a bit and support, the move for this because it has come up, in the for me in the past as well, and where, and I am a single parent. So I do, haven't had any negative impacts of this option. We also have a high deductible plan as well, and I don't know if you thought about that as an option as well as the cash in lieu. A high deductible, this allows you as an employee to take a risk, to say you're willing just to have more in your monthly paycheck, and then accept a little bit more out of pocket if you should have an occurrence or a situation that needs it. But I do support it, and this cash in lieu as well. So going to alternate insurers, outside of, if the current plan through SSM isn't good enough, are there viable options out there that are better? Would that cash in lieu actually be able to buy that option? It doesn't seem like $2,000 a year is going to really allow that.
Yeah, I doubt that the cash in lieu is enough to directly buy another option someplace else. When we moved to SSM, we moved there for some very defined and very favorable financial considerations.
Yeah.
We looked at everyone else in the marketplace at that point. Ford's refused to negotiate, and their prices have gotten untenable for us. GHC is generally more expensive and untenable for us. So we took a look at all of those. We technically have a high deductible plan. The deductible is $2,000.
Oh, that is a high deductible.
But we have a very favorable plan organization where that high deductible, the first 75% of it is automatically reimbursed through a health reimbursement account with city funds for each employee. So health insurance itself is very affordable for our employees, for those that are elected. This is simply a benefit for those that don't elect it and don't have the city bear the burden. We follow the state split of 12.5% employee costs, and that is a requirement ETF, and the city bears the rest. And that is the same between family and single plans. So most of the private sector, the family plans are significantly more expensive. So this just gives a bit of balance between those that are not using their health insurance.
Yeah, it sounds very similar to what I see for our offerings.
Jennifer.
Yeah, my question is relative to Alder Hanairo's point about who this would benefit, in addition to those who can have coverage under their spouse's plan. Would this would also benefit those that are under age 26 who can remain on parental plans until that time, correct?
I haven't looked at that question. Nobody's asked that question, so I would have to research that and see how the parental coverage to 26.
I would feel much more comfortable knowing that there's more than one universe of people who could benefit from this. So unless folks feel passionately about passing this tonight, I would ask that we consider this at our next joint meeting. After Brian can check on that question about the 26 and or under 26 employees. And also help us understand what were some of the requests on the survey that you did. Sound fair enough?
My last comment is not to be too simplistic about it, but we are trying to keep our fabulous staff here. And I think this incentive goes a little bit toward that.
Well, and I guess I would add, I think that's what we all want, is to keep our fabulous staff. And that's why I'm so interested in parental leave, because I know we have a fairly young workforce, and I would love to see us offer something in the way of paid parental leave beyond the FMLA that's available.
Can I ask how that gets addressed by deferring this question tonight?
Well, just as a matter of resources, do we have, I mean, we know the cost. Do we know the cost of this, including payroll withholding?
Yeah, so based on current rates and current employees, we have 27 employees that are choosing to waive health insurance currently. With the opt-out and the city share of FICA on the opt-out payment, the annual cost would be roughly $58,000 per year. A family plan city cost is about $15,667. Single plan $62,87. So looking at the break-even point, you would need about just under 3.8, currently choosing a family plan to choose to opt out, or 9.3 in a single plan to opt out, or some combination of the two. But total exposure, if nobody were to switch, and based on current numbers, waiving is about 58,000. As we discussed this, we didn't want to bring this forward as a potential cost savings. There may be some people that switch that help offset that cost. It's possible there could be some savings. Could be possible that there's some net cost, but it's primarily being brought forward as another option in our benefit plan, something that would match the state and some other employers, and that we've had employees asking for.
Does that answer your question?
Not really, but this is sort of outside the realm of my expertise. So when we start talking about costs of healthcare and costs of family leave, it sort of goes into a void in my head that I obviously am privileged enough to not have to, I can't quite grab my head around it right now. But I just don't think that we're going to, for me anyway, deferring the question is not going to change my vote. But if you, I don't know that if, I mean, I have no problem with it, I guess, if you need more time.
I would appreciate a little more time. I mean, the answer to the question, how would this make a difference? You know, I feel like if we have $58,000 to spend, like, if there must be a reason why we're not offering parental leave, you know, a week or two of paid parental leave. It seems to me it's a resource issue more than anything. And so I guess and plus this is the first I learned that there's a survey that the employees get asking them what kind of benefits that they want. And I guess I'd like to see what some of the other requests have been. Maybe there's something that we're not aware of that we could fund with this money instead.
Yeah, if I could just clarify on the survey. So when we took a look at changing the time off balances and accruals, we conducted a survey primarily focused on that. I included one question with a number of different options that employees may elect for other things, additional subsidized family and elder care. This was one of the options that was included. There were a number of different time off options that were included. We have not done a canvassing survey of employees for just open ideas for benefits that they want. I do know that this is one that is repeatedly requested. This was, other than more personal holidays and increased vacation, which was what we were primarily looking at, this was the highest ranked benefit after that, with a number of employees, with at least 6 employees who currently have a plan indicating, no guarantee, indicating that they were interested in opting out if they had the opportunity to opt out. I definitely can provide that information. It is less instructive, in my opinion, than you believe it
Maybe. It was just a set of questions with not a great scientific number of not responses to get confidence in the survey, but it exists.
Lisa, you're the yin to my yang. And I want to know if there's a world in which there's a yes and.
Yes. I mean, I feel like if we can get a commitment to have this joint group consider other options from that survey and possibly parental leave, because I know Mayor Kuhn would support that. And the travel allowance, as complicated as it would be, the travel allowance for healthcare services out of state is very important to me, and I'm guessing many other women, to see that kind of parity exist. So yes, I can support the proposal tonight, and I'd like to see us broaden the discussion of other benefits that we might be able to offer our employees to keep them happy.
What about, so let me just understand this, saying, okay, so in lieu of cash, we're proposing multiple options. You can have cash, or no, you could maybe in exchange of the money, have more additional leave. So you're trying to expand the options beyond that.
No, that's not what I'm suggesting. I'm suggesting going, because it sounds like my colleagues like this benefit the way it is and don't have the same concerns that I do. So I'm willing to say, let's go forward with it tonight.
Okay.
And I'd like to see us address other benefits in the future that we come up with based on information that Brian can provide us. Fair enough.
Absolutely. And for our next meeting, I will bring in those survey results. And since those are a couple of the topics that have been mentioned, I definitely will prepare some information and recommendations on both of those for our next meeting.
Great. Appreciate that. Okay. So would somebody like to move that we recommend this to council for consideration?
I so move that we recommend cash in lieu of health insurance.
So Alder Lorman for Finance has moved that we recommend that council implement a cash in lieu option for employees not enrolling in the city's health insurance plan.
Correct.
And get a second from Finance?
Oh, from finance? Yes, I will second.
Then for Personnel.
Motion, yeah. Do I have a motion from personnel?
I move to move this recommendation forward, yes.
Second.
I'll second it.
May I ask, point of, I'm going to call it information. Is Alder-elect Cole? Okay, cleared to be a member.
Yes, she did a private swearing in ceremony last week, Thursday, and we'll do the public swearing in ceremony
I did
tonight.
not know that. Thank you. Okay, so Jeff Jackson, Alder Jackson. Okay.
Yeah, it is.
So we have a motion and a second for Finance. Further discussion, hearing none. All those in favor for Finance signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, the ayes have it.
Any further discussion from personnel? Hearing none. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Okay, well, the next item officially is to adjourn the Personnel Committee. I would like to suggest, since we've talked about items for future agendas for our next joint meeting, I'd like to suggest that we carve out time to discuss whether to merge our two committees. This is consistent with one of our priorities from the strategic plan, CO-2D, streamlining committee structure. And then if we agree that merging is a good idea, let's talk about how and when to make that happen. And I'm also going to suggest that we resume the discussion I brought up early, I think it was the first meeting of the Finance Committee in January, a discussion of compensation for elected officials. The rates have not been increased since 2007 for the mayor and the municipal judge, and since 2008 for the alders. And I know there was a study study or examination done in 2018 that showed we were not inconsistent with our peers. To me, that wasn't the issue. The issue was there hadn't been an increase in, at that time, 10 years, and now it's 15. So I would like to see that on a future joint meeting agenda. All right, and now you all get to adjourn.
All right,
I move to adjourn.
for a second.
I second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 It's now is adjourned.
Great. Thank you. Okay, so the Finance Committee will continue. One thing I wanted to ask at the beginning, so we learned last week that even small amendments to motions, such as adding at a council meeting, adding, oh wait, it's supposed to say in an amount not to exceed X, or oh wait, we agreed it was, pending city attorney review and approval. Those all need to be voted on as separate amendments to the motion, which is going to add more time. So I'm going to ask, I think it might be a good practice if my colleagues would allow me as the chair of finance to make any motions that come out of the finance committee meeting that are on the council agenda. And if you'll let me do that, I will do my best to faithfully relay the exact wording. I'll also note that we have a lot of things on our agenda tonight, so I ask everyone to try to be brief. That said, we have our auditors here. They are a great resource, so please do take the opportunity to ask questions after they give us their presentation on our comprehensive financial report. First item of business, though, is the minutes of the May 16th, 2023 Finance Committee meeting. Does anybody have corrections to the minutes? Any corrections? Hearing none, the minutes are approved. Next is the audit of the bills to be paid. Phil, do you have any updates for us?
No additions tonight.
Awesome, no additions. So can I get a motion to approve the audit?
Mrs. Wilkes, I'll make a motion to approve the audit.
Thank you.
This is Jackson. I'll second it.
All right, any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of approving the audit of the bills to be paid signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, the motion carries. We'll move on to our presentation. So we'll have a presentation and then we're going to consider acceptance of the city's 2022 annual comprehensive financial report. And John Rader, a District 6 resident, is here to give us, coincidentally, to give us the presentation. You have the floor.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having us here tonight. Appreciate it. And as was mentioned, please do take this opportunity to ask us questions. You can stop us during this 10-minute presentation, or at the end, it really doesn't matter to us. That's one of the reasons that we got here. My name is John Rader, as was mentioned.
Oh, yeah, we need him.
Thank you. Thank you very much. As was mentioned, my name is John Rader. I'm a director with Baker Tilly. I've been involved with the city's audit for the last few years, so it's really nice. It's my shortest commute of all my audits. And along with me is Jody Dobson, and Jody is a partner in the energy and utility side. We're going to share this presentation. I'm going to start us off by walking through what Bill has pulled up here, our financial highlights, focusing first on the governmental funds, so the general fund, your TIF funds and such. And I'll turn it over to Jody to talk about the water and sewer fund. Before I jump into the materials here, just a couple of brief comments. A lot of times people, and I know there's new faces here, so a lot of times a misunderstanding or not completely understanding what an audit entails. It actually happens in phases. So we come out in the early part of the winter and we focus on testing controls. We do walkthroughs of what we consider your key transaction areas. How do you process payroll and invoices and collect taxes? We visit some departments upon request. We do a lot of planning procedures, kind of set the stage for when we come back in April. And we do divide up our teams. There's a crossover, but the utility team comes out for several days. And then our team auditing the governmental funds come out for most of a week. And we kind of work through all the actual testing. At that point in time, and I will add that Bill and Diego and their entire team are very well prepared for us. So that makes those audit days go very smoothly. So when we leave, we're actually focused on preparing the city's financial statements. And so we do prepare that for the city, just like we do for the majority of our clients. And once we prepare that draft, we send it to Bill for his review, and he reviews it very closely, which we appreciate because we're not here every day like he is. So he knows all the details. We go back and forth. And then the city, Bill prepares several sections of it. One is the statistical section in the back of the financial statements. And I encourage you to take a look at that. I think that's one of the most interesting areas because it gives you a 10-year history of a lot of different numbers and demographics and such. It's very useful. And then up front is the management discussion and analysis, the MD&A. That's like an executive summary. And again, Bill does an exceptional job, and I review a lot of these every year, and so does Jody. He does an exceptional job of explaining the differences, the variances that happen within the city during the year. So I encourage you to look at those documents. So we review that, make sure it's consistent with what we've audited. And at that point in time, which is right now, once we're all on the same page, we will issue finals. So we're anticipating issue finals later this week. And so that will then allow the city to submit that report, the annual comprehensive financial report, or ACFR, as we say, to GFOA for what hopefully will be 5th year or so, I think, of getting the award that they provide. So that's a big accomplishment. It's a lot of hurdles to cross, but we're almost there once again. So with that said, I'm going to walk through the numbers, and this is page 1 of your materials. And it's focusing on the general fund. The general fund is, as you know, the primary operating fund of the city. And this is taking a look at the fund balance or equity at the end of the year. In a governmental fund balance reporting, you can have 5 different components of fund balance. And I'm going to start at the bottom here. So that non-spendable, that just little bit amount presented, the green bars are the 2022, black is last year. So $259,000. Non-spendable is exactly like it sounds. There are amounts that are part of your fund balance that just aren't available for anything else. So this is made up of prepaid amounts that have already been committed and a little bit of long-term receivables. So they're not available to meet the current needs of the city. Working our way up, there's nothing in restricted or committed, and restrictions are really external restrictions. Then we get into assigned, and you can see that number is $4,022,000, very, very close to last year. And that's comprised of 3 different items. One is $2.4 million that's made up or been set aside, I should say, for compensated absences, future retiree payouts. 1.2 for fire, and $380,000 for EMS purposes. The unassigned is basically everything that's left. And that number is $6.9 million. It's up about $282,000 from the prior year. And I'm going to get to that number again on the next page. So overall, your fund balance went up for the year for the general fund by $58,000. And you can see in the middle of this, if we go down just a little bit, a very high level or summarized income statement where you can see that same $58,000 in the far left column. Essentially, when you compare that to $22 million in operations, you broke even. And how you compare to budget is also on here. You can see that the revenues came in about $302,000 ahead of budget. And the details of a lot of that are in the back of the financial statements on pages 53 to 56. But when looking it over this morning, it's made up primarily of room taxes that were over, a variety of permits, building and such, and ambulance fees. And we have seen EMS fees being over budget in a lot of places this year. Expenses, you can see, are under budget by $830,000. I should have brought my readers. And that's a whole host of things that are some are over, some are under. But the big drivers there were the emergency contingency funds that weren't utilized to the extent that you thought they would be. Public safety, again, fire and EMS, as well as public works. And again, I encourage you to look at the MD&A where this is all spelled out very well. All right, the next page. So we're going to go back to that $6.9 million. So the city has a policy, a really solid fund balance policy in my mind, of trying to establish an unassigned amount that falls within the ranges. And that's 16 to 33%, or think of that as 2 to 4 months of operations. Okay, it's purely for liquidity's sake. And that is calculated right below there towards the top of this page. So your 23 budget that you're operating in now has that $24 million. And so you have a 28% percentage. You have 28% when you compare to what your unassigned is to your budget expenditures. And you can see how that plotted out over the last 5 years. steady increase for the first four and just a slight dip downwards in the current year, but still within that range and towards the upper maximum amount that you've set as a threshold. For comparative purposes, we put this on all the graphs that we present to municipalities in Wisconsin. You can see those blue dots of similar municipalities in Wisconsin based upon population. The distinction here, though, is your policy is based upon just unassigned. And when we accumulate this data in the fall from the previous year's audited financials, we're including both assigned and unassigned. So you would be closer probably to those blue dots if we were to look at that. But the most important thing is that you have a policy and you adhere to it. Any questions on that in the general fund? Okay, now I'll flip to the next page where we're going to shift gears here. Now we're going to look at debt for the next two pages before I turn over to Jody. And two different ways of looking at debt. One is how much debt do you have outstanding? And then how much do you pay in debt service or principal and interest? And statutorily in Wisconsin, we're limited to 5% of your equalized value. And that's that black line that's been plotted out there. About a 12% increase from the prior year from 21 to 22. So nice solid growth. And the green line is your GO debt, your tax backed debt, which does include your TIF debt as well. That's been steadily going down, including about a $1.5 million decrease in the current year. Okay. Again, you do have a policy, and your policy is pretty consistent with the statutes, but then you further limit it to 66 or 2/3% of that statutory limit. And so at the end of the year, you were sitting at 16% of your debt limit. Again, if you were to look at those statistical pages in the back, there's a table back there, table 12, that shows a 10-year history of this. And you can see it's been going down a couple percentage points over the last several years. And it was back, I think, 8 or 9 years ago, it was around 40%. And that's probably related to a lot of TIF debt that was outstanding in the early days of TIF 3 especially. Okay, but a nice steady gap widening is what you want to see there. So no concerns there. You can see a summary at the bottom, the different types of debt that's outstanding. You don't have any GO debt in your utility funds. We do see that a fair amount, but not for Middleton. You don't have any revenue debt either. So it's all within your governmental funds. And again, your compensated absences, the accrued amounts are detailed there as well, the $3.6 million. We used to put some comparative data on this table as well for other places we audited. We don't do that anymore. It's just got a little bit complex to present. But this Wisconsin Policy Forum link here has some great data out there if you're ever interested, including debt, a lot of good resources where you can see how you compare to other places of similar size and within the county too. And then the next page is, like I said, taking a look at what do you pay during the year for principal and interest. And again, this is just your governmental funds. And at the end of the year, it was at 17.4%, so the same as last year. We generally try to recommend you maintain that at 20% or less, just so it doesn't become too much of a burden. And as you can see, you manage your debt quite well, both internally and I'm sure with your advisors too. So again, you can see how you compare to other places that we audit. There's a lot of variability, especially with municipalities with active TIFs as far as what these numbers can be. Any questions on the debt? I'll turn it over to Jill.
Thank you very much. And thank you again for having us here tonight. So I want to talk about the two utilities, the water utility and the sewer utility. We're going to start with the water utility. And the first number we have on here is the rate of return. And this is a key figure because the Public Service Commission at the state level regulates what the water utility is allowed to charge for rates. And this is part of how they establish those rates, is they're designed to be able to recover the operating costs of the utility and then earn a return on investment in capital assets. So as we look at the 2 years here, there were new rates put in place, and that authorized rate of return decreased a little bit. And it's really because when the state establishes rates and looks at that, they look at what are the current borrowing rates and then have an adder. So unfortunately, this was done when borrowing rates were quite low. And so that's why that did go down a little bit. But we can see that based on those new rates being in place, your actual rate of return increased from the prior year. And then the table we have below that shows the green line is operating revenues and the black line is operating expenses. So we can see the impact of that rate increase during the year there, bringing up the revenues. And then actually expenses decreased a little bit based on your management. So overall, seeing consistent positive margins over time there. And that's just something we really recommend that you monitor proactively so that you don't let that gap get too small before you go in for another rate adjustment. And then looking just below that table, we have the unrestricted cash reserves. So the GFOA, or the Government Finance Officers Association, would recommend a minimum of 3 billing cycles in cash reserves. I know rating agencies, when they're looking at utilities, when they're issuing debt, are often looking for 6 to 9 months worth of cash reserves. So here you can see you've actually got almost 17 months of cash reserves at year end. So very strong. And as we look at that historical information, they're very stable cash reserves, which is why the point below that can be true, is that you don't have any debt outstanding. So the utility's been able to maintain a cash reserve and then fund capital improvements out of that, which is really positive. We go then to the next page, we have similar information for the sewer utility. Now, we don't have that rate of return because these rates are not regulated at the state level. It's just at the local level. And what we do see in the graph here is that as rates were adjusted in 2021 to bring those revenues up, but expenses have continued to increase in 2022. And I think probably the biggest driver there is the treatment costs from MMSD. And so that's just something that I would encourage you again to monitor, is if you're continuing to see those increase or thinking that's going to be a new normal level, to look and see if those rates need to be adjusted again. That said, as we look at the cash reserves below the table, the year-end balance, you've got almost 7 months of cash reserves. And again, very stable over the last 5 years. So not quite as large as what the water utility has, but you've got a different level of capital spending in your sewer utility because you don't have to maintain a wastewater treatment plant. So that's a little different mix. And also the sewer utility, as John noted earlier, there's no outstanding debt for the sewer utility infrastructure either. So overall, very positive results for both utilities. And if there are any other questions on this information or the full reports that you received.
All right, thank you. Does any member have a question for either of our speakers?
I have a question about the sewer utility. What is the rate? If it's not regulated by state, is there a certain rate of?
So the sewer utility rates are typically developed looking at what are the needs of the sewer utility. So it's the operating costs, routine capital, and then if you were to have debt outstanding, debt service, and that's regulated at the local level.
So that's set by our own
Yeah, so
policy.
the council ultimately approves those rates when they change.
Okay.
And most sewer rates are just based on water flow. So there's not a separate measurement. If you use 100 gallons of water, it generates a water bill and
a sewer bill. Okay, thank you. So they are linked. Okay, thank you.
Right,
with some exceptions.
Any further questions? You addressed the one I was going to ask, which is what's the comparison to municipalities for the general obligation debt capacity chart? So thank you for that. I'll check out the link.
If I may, I
Yes,
just want
Bill.
to add that late on Friday, we sent out the draft of the financial statements. As the auditors had indicated, they'll be finalizing those later this week, and I'll be sending out the final versions. If there are any questions after you have a chance to look at those, please let me know. If you have any questions for the auditors, I'd be happy to pass that on to the team as well.
Okay, but in the meantime, do you need us to?
Yeah, I think there would be a recommendation from finance for acceptance of the statements, and then this item's also on council tonight as well for acceptance.
All right, would somebody like to move acceptance?
I move that we accept it.
All right, so we have a motion by Alder Jackson to accept the city's 2022 annual comprehensive financial report.
I'll second.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, the ayes have it. We'll pass that on to council. Thank you both so much.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on to resolutions. We have 3. First one is resolution 2023-33, amending the 2023 approved ARPA budget for the purchase of electronic poll books. We approved this in concept last time, and tonight's action is just to formally amend the budget. So who would like to make that motion?
I'll make a motion that we approve the resolution 2023, amending the 2023 approved ARPA budget for purchase of electronic poll books.
I second that motion.
All right, so we have a motion to approve resolution 2023-33, amending the 2023 approved ARPA budget for the purchase of electronic poll books. we have a
Before you
second?
vote, just to note that the version that's in your packet was replaced today by a new version, which accurately reflects the source of the revenue. Doesn't change the numbers, but it's a different account.
Yep.
So let's hope we're looking at the same document.
Yes, that correction was actually made yesterday, correct?
Yeah, and that was emailed out separately and updated in the
Yep.
packet.
We appreciate that. Thanks, sir. Okay, if there's no further discussion, then all those in favor of the motion to approve resolution 2023-33, amending the 2023 approved ARPA budget for the purchase of electronic poll books, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Right, the ayes have it. Moving on to resolution number 2. Resolution 2023-34, ratification to intervene in the 2023 Madison Gas and Electric MG&E rate case docket number 3270-UR-125. Would like to move approval or ratification.
I shall move for approval ratification of the, sorry, I lost my page here, resolution 2023-34 ratification intervene in 2023 Madison Gas and Electric MGE rate case docket 3270-UR-125.
Thank you. Do we have a second?
This is Wilkes, I'll second.
All right, so we have a motion and a second discussion.
Just to be clear, the reason for the ratification is because there was a PSC deadline for intervention last week. So that's why the papers had to be filed before your approval.
Thank you.
So the city is a party at this point.
Yep.
And point of information, if I may.
Yes, go ahead.
Just wanted to clarify, we'll likely be following up at one of the subsequent meetings with a more firm estimate of the cost and a source of funding for the attorney time for the intervention. We don't have a good estimate at this point tonight. So I think this item is asking for ratification of intervening. We'll be having a meeting between staff and the city attorney that is working on this and then coming back with a recommendation.
Okay. I would just like to say that, in November, we honored the president and CEO of MG&E, Jeff Keebler, with a proclamation, and he talked about their aggressive goal to reduce carbon by 80% by 2030 without customers having to do anything on their own. And now I look back on that statement and I think, this isn't quite what I had in mind. I don't think we can get to this goal faster if we are not hampered by a rate case that creates a disincentive to going with distributed solar. So I'm glad to see that our staff has taken action on this. Okay, so any further questions, comments? Hearing none, all those in favor of the motion to approve resolution 2023-34 ratification to intervene in the 2023 Madison Gas and Electric rate case docket number 3270 UR 125 signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, the ayes have it. Moving on to our last resolution. It's resolution, I think it should be 2023-35, amending the 2023 approved transit budget to support improvements for new bus stop locations. And this comes to us from ourselves. which is fine. Who would like to move approval?
Mrs. Wilkes, I'll move approval for resolution 2023-35, amending the 2023 approved transit budget.
Great,
Oh, second.
thank you. Any discussion? I know this is a late breaking development arising from a much larger amount of funding than we had originally thought we were going to be getting. I did have a question for Abby, if she would go to the microphone, please. And that is just that I noticed there are 5 new shelters, 4 redeployed for a total of 9. But the plan right now is to only redeploy 3 or repurpose 3 of those shelters. And my question is, given that the amount, the 100,000 is still going to leave a balance of $116,154. And given the apparently not exorbitant cost of the shelters, instead of keeping one of those 4 existing shelters in storage for, as a contingency, why not just redeploy that one? And if we need to purchase a new one, we could do that.
Yep. Our staff would be supportive of that. And we have a full spreadsheet. What's included in your packet is just the improvements that we're recommending at this time, trying to stay beneath that $100,000 level. We would expect that in future years, we would be bringing other requests forward based on ridership levels once the new service goes into effect and we can see how it's being used. I would support deploying that shelter, and we have identified a location that we expect would have high ridership and also is within one of those equity focus areas. And that would be at Allen and Mendota southbound. So I think we could go ahead and deploy that. We already have an existing concrete pad at that stop. It's 10 by 10. It would need to be slightly expanded, but we think we could do that within the contingency. So I think that what Alderwoman Hanairo is suggesting can be done within the current budget.
Great. And just taking a quick look at the resolution itself, I don't see anything in here that would need to be amended if we were to authorize staff to go forward with redeploying all 4 of the shelters. So we would not have to amend the resolution itself. Thoughts? Do the others agree with letting them use all 4 existing bus shelters? I'm super excited about the installation of bike racks. Thank you so much, Alder Wilkes, for bringing that up. I'm going to be one of the first people to take advantage of that. One last question, Abby, when do you expect the improvements will be made?
So for the concrete pads, we are going to be working with Public Works to get an amendment to the sidewalk program. We'll work with Tom Weber, our engineering technician, tomorrow morning to determine the schedule for that. But we can't, I don't know the exact timeline on getting the shelters and the racks ordered and in hand, but we won't be able to install any of those improvements until the concrete pads are poured and cured.
Okay, sounds good. And I'll also note for my colleagues that Bill and I, when we discussed the agenda for tonight, one of the things we talked about was this excess $116,154. And last year, I can't remember which date exactly, but when we first learned that we might have a little bit, I think it was $3,000 or $4,000 in excess because of the way we were changing our aid for transit. Former Alder Kathy Olson suggested creating a fund, special revenue fund specifically for transit. And, we were going to do that with just a few $1,000s. So during our budget process this year, that's one of the things we'll be considering is creating a fund specifically for that revenue, and this $116,154 would be a great addition to that when we get there. Okay, so all those in favor of approving resolution 2023-35, amending the 2023 approved transit budget to support improvements for new bus stop locations, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Great, the ayes have it. Moving on to agreements and contracts, we have 3 The first one is the First Amendment to the Community Development Block Grant, or CDBG, Disaster Recovery Grant Award Agreement with Madison Development Corporation to construct 52 units of workforce housing at 6908 Century Avenue. And this comes to us from council. Who would like to move approval?
I will move approval for the First Amendment to the Community Development Block Grant, CBG, Disaster Recovery, DR, Grant Awarding Agreement with Madison Development Corporation to construct 52 units of workforce housing at 6908 Century Avenue.
Thank you. Do we have a second?
This is Wilkes, I'll second.
Thank you. Any questions or comments? I brought to Abby's attention earlier that the exhibit refers to units being available at less than 80% of the CMI, but the wording on page 28 of the First Amendment and also on page 34 of the land use restriction, which we're going to consider next, that one says at or below 80%. And I believe it's the at or below 80% that we want to see changed in the exhibit. It should match that. Correct, Abby? That's correct. Okay. All right. So with that correction to be made, there's no further discussion. All those in favor of approving the First Amendment to the Community Development Block Grant Disaster Recovery Grant Award Agreement with Madison Development Corporation to construct 52 units of workforce housing at 6908 Century Avenue, signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, the ayes have it. Moving on to related item, the land use restriction agreement with Madison Development Corporation to construct 52 units of workforce housing at 6908 Century Avenue. This comes to us from staff and our city attorney.
This is Wilkes. I will move that we approve the land use restriction agreement with Madison Development Corporation to construct 52 units of workforce housing at 6908 Century Avenue.
I'll second.
Thank you. Discussion. Larry, is there anything you wanted to bring to our attention?
No, this has been reviewed and it's satisfactory.
Okay, great. All right, if there's no further discussion, all those in favor of approving the land use restriction agreement with Madison Development Corporation to construct 52 units of workforce housing at 6908 Century Avenue, signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, the ayes have it. The next item is related to this as well. It's the construction escrow agreement with Madison Development Corporation for the Community Development Block Grant Disaster Recovery Funds. Who would like to move approval?
I will move approval of construction escrow agreement with Madison Development Corporation, the Community Development Block Grant Disaster Recovery Funds.
Get a second?
I second that.
Thank you. And I should have noted that, Larry, this is subject to the resolution of city attorney comments.
Remember, you get one review and it's satisfactory.
Oh, that's good. I was,
Yes.
Last I had chatted with Attorney Fleming about this one. He did want to keep the subject to city attorney. I haven't talked with him in the last couple of days, so.
Well, I thought so I reviewed them.
I'm sorry, there's a disturbance from Galaxy S9. Okay, so we don't need to make this subject to resolution of city attorney comments. Motion is in order. There's no further discussion. All those in favor of approving the construction escrow agreement with Madison Development Corporation for the Community Development Block Grant Disaster Recovery Funds signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right, the ayes have it. Moving on to bids and quotes. We have one item, and it is the award of bid to Farner Asphalt Sealers in the amount of $194,837 for 2023 street surface treatments. And this comes to us from Public Works. And before I get a motion, I'd like to mention that this item, the Public Works Committee voted unanimously to make 2 recommendations to Finance and Council, and they're lumped into this one item in our packets, but not necessarily in the wording of this item on the agenda. So the first movement was to award a construction contract, which we don't actually have. It should have been a bid, but to award the bid, let's say to Farner, in the amount not to exceed. But then we also recommended to Finance and Common Council, authorizing staff to increase the project scope of pavement surface treatments to maximize the maintenance work that can be achieved within this year's budget allocation of $250,000. So basically, we were giving Sean Stowski the authority to not come to us again to say, hey, we learned we can do this. He'll be able to go up to the budget allocation of $250,000 without necessarily coming back to us. Now, I note also, we did earmark some of that $100,000 or $250,000 if there were overages to offset any of the overages on the Parmenter Street reconstruction. So Sean, I was wondering if it's too early to tell if there were going to be overages. Is that correct?
I still don't know with certainty how we'll end that project. I know we had some additional costs, but we also had some cost savings when we had to change gaskets. Now it cost us some money to be able to do that, but with soil testing and water testing. So I just don't know the answer to that yet.
Okay, fair enough. Thank you, Sean. But I just wanted the members to know that we might not have up to $250,000 to spend on this. It might be less because of Parmenter Street. So I would love to get one motion from someone combining the two. And for simplicity, I'll go ahead and state the motion and I'll correct the reference to the construction contract. So the motion would be to award the bid to Farner Asphalt Sealers in the amount of $194,837 for 2023 street surface treatments and to authorize staff to increase the project scope of pavement surface treatments to maximize the maintenance work that can be achieved within this year's budget allocation of $250,000. Who would like to make that motion?
I will make a motion to then award the bid to Farner. Okay.
Yep.
Farner Asphalt Sealers in the amount of $194,837 for the 2023 street resurfacing treatment.
And to authorize
And
staff.
to authorize staff to use the additional $50,000 funds for remaining repairs and treatments.
I would ask to rephrase that to up to this year's budget
Up to
allocation.
this year's budget allocation. Okay,
Thanks.
thank you.
And I did send Brian the text of the two merged motions from Public Works. Can I get a second?
Mrs. Wilkes, I'll second.
Great. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of approving the award of bid to Farner Asphalt Sealers in the amount of $194,837 for 2023 street surface treatments and to authorize staff to increase the project scope of pavement surface treatments to maximize the maintenance work that can be achieved within this year's budget allocation of $250,000, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right, the ayes have it. Moving on, we have two miscellaneous items. First one is city match percentage commitment for the carbon reduction program partial grant award for 2023. And I will invite Kelly to the podium to give us a wee bit of background on this.
Yeah, I hope not to derail your streamlined meeting. I asked Bill or Brian to maybe pull up a slide that I produced today to clarify a few things and offer some options to react to that are simple. The background is that I wrote a grant to convert all of our city-owned streetlights to LED, which would save approximately $22,500 a year in operating costs. The way that I wrote the grant was for over a 2-year period. That's what the MPO wanted me to do. It was a $530,000 grant over the course of 2 years. And our grant was big compared to the other communities who applied, and they awarded us $124,800 approximately, which is 24% of the total ask. And so upon that, they called me and said, what do you want to do with this? Like, we're very willing to give you this money, but do you want to scale the scope of the project back so that you don't have such a big match? Do you want to match higher than the required 20% for the project? And so those things are on the table for discussion. And so there's several options. I believe that option 2 and option 3, which I can just briefly talk about, are the more aggressive approaches to try to keep the project on track to complete over the course of 2 years. I would definitely have to reapply for an additional grant next year to finish this project. But the way I have it laid out is that council always has the option to reject the funds outright so that there's no match. The other options are to do a match of $155,000 by the city, with the total cost being $280,000. One thing that's changed just by yesterday, Wisconsin Department of Transportation called me and said that they now want to make this grant only for materials. So we cannot use this grant to fund labor. But if we don't have any money to fund the labor, then I fear that we'll purchase a lot of fixtures and they'll sit on a shelf for many years. So my recommendation, or as staff, would be to try to fund the labor separately from the grant and the match for that grant, so that we can actually put the lights in to receive the benefits. Option 3 is much more aggressive. It would cover the entire cost of the first year of the project that I had in the initial grant, which was a total of $365,000. Of that, because the grant only covers $125,000, the match would then be $240,000. And at this time, we're not prepared to say exactly which funds we'd pull from. It would probably be a combination of ARPA funds, surplus capital funds, which we can flesh out before the next meeting and bring a recommendation. What the MPO wants by tomorrow is a commitment of what size of project we're going to do and the match commitments. They don't need to know where the money comes from, but they want a commitment of a certain percentage of a match. So there's lots of options here. It's a bit, it's a bit complicated.
Sure. No, we appreciate the complexity of it all, Kelly, and I appreciate you explaining that to us and being on top of this. I guess one question I have is, since we're talking, the agenda item is a match percentage. So if it's exactly $155,000, that as a percentage of the total cost of the project, which is $530,998. So our match would be about 29.2%. Is that correct?
I believe option 2 had scaled back the project scope.
Okay.
So it throws off, it's not a match for the 530,000, it's a match of a scaled back version of the project. And Sean Stowski had mentioned that, we could always do an option of a much smaller project over the course of many more years. That would hinge on getting a grant each year, but you could scale the project back as much as $156,000, and then the city would have a $31,000 match approximately, and it would just be much less forward momentum, and that would have to just be for materials. We would still be then looking for funding for the labor to put those fixtures up.
Thank you. Questions, comments before we make a motion on this?
One of my questions is, you mentioned it's scaling back many years. How many years are we, roughly talking about?
Well, we have in one, well, let's see, just a second. We have approximately 830 fixtures to replace. And the way I'd written the grant initially was to finish that in 2 years. And we could do that. We had looked into the labor costs for that. We could spread that out over a course of more years, and do less each year for less money each year.
But you said that we could do it in 2 years.
If we have the money, sure. Yeah. It really just comes down to the labor, paying for the labor to do it and having the money for the material costs. I do anticipate that there will be another round of grants next year for sure, although they may open the eligibility for this grant funding to include EV infrastructure. So at that point, I feel like I would come back to council and see, of your priorities, would you prefer me to go for a grant for streetlights or for EV infrastructure? So my feeling was to try to do as much as we can, as soon as we can on streetlights, because they do have advantageous payback and they're in the top 3 priorities within our energy plan for carbon emission savings as well.
I appreciate the strike while the iron's hot approach. And Bill, did you have something to add?
Yeah, I just wanted to provide some additional information on possible funding sources that we had discussed. So as Kelly indicated, one of the possible sources is looking at remaining ARPA funds. The city at this point for 2024 had earmarked $201,500 in ARPA funding that hasn't been formally budgeted yet. It was just kind of earmarked for projects, and that'll be reviewed as part of the upcoming budget process. The largest item within that was the 3rd year of the energy efficiency NOAA project at $150,000, and then various other smaller amounts bringing up just over $200,000. We also have about $27,000 remaining in money that has not been allocated at all from ARPA. I anticipate that we may have some other savings from items that were budgeted this year that don't use the full budget amount. I don't know that number yet. The other piece that we don't know yet is what savings, if any, we will have from some of our other capital projects, as Sean Selsky was just talking about with Parmenter, and we may have some savings for other projects. So I think at this point, if there is a commitment to move forward, one option would be to say that we would look at utilizing a portion of those allocated but not yet budgeted ARPA funds and potentially reducing that if there's other money that we can apply either from capital savings or other ARPA savings. But I do want the Finance Committee and Council to be aware up front that if we do commit to going forward with this, with ARPA as a possible funding source, we may need to scale back on some of those other items we'd earmarked for ARPA funds.
Thank you, Bill. And can you tell me what the total right now of our ARPA funds, what's the total that's allocated to stormwater projects?
Yes, we have 2 stormwater projects for a total of $640,000. That was budgeted for 2023, but has not been spent yet.
Okay. And so that is something that we could, in theory, and we did last year, we moved some of the funding from ARPA to the stormwater utility fund because we had the money to do that and the projects were eligible for that, correct?
Yeah, there are stormwater projects. I believe they would be eligible for funding under either ARPA or the stormwater utility. Currently, they are budgeted under the ARPA fund. I apologize. I'm getting confused about what you're asking about. There was another separate project outside of those 2 that was moved to the stormwater utility. That's correct.
Yep. Okay. Thoughts? Motions? I'll just say, I think it's worth the investment. TNT today, not tomorrow. I know last year we wound up allocating $67,888 of our general contingency to fuel overages. I know that doesn't have, it's not an apples to apples comparison, but does show that, we come up with the money when we need to for energy related things. And I think this would be great to make use of the full amount of the grant and invest more of the city's resources into changing out our streetlights. It's consistent with the policy we just passed. So I don't know how the others feel, but I would love to get a motion to go with one of these options.
I guess my only question is, we don't know where the money's gonna come from. So, and it's a chunk of money. I'm certainly in favor of doing this, but always doing it without sacrificing other sources and places that we also need funds. So I'm more of a compromising kind of person, that take advantage of some of this, move ahead with some of it without sacrificing other things that maybe were already planned for or budgeted for, or that we're thinking about doing. We can also get more of this next year. To reapplying for the grant year number 2. Plus, as you said, it might change. We might have then EV infrastructure at that time. So I don't know.
So may I ask, are you suggesting like the middle option?
I
would be
am definitely more
your
of a
comfort?
middle option person on this project.
Would you like to make a motion?
Well, is there any other discussion?
I'm in agreement with you. I find option 2 a little bit less risky. I feel like it shows that we're making a concerted effort to make a step forward, but that we have other projects that we're also concerned about. I mean, I'm always conscious of going back and asking for more money. If that's going to, if they say no, then what do we do? And that would be my one concern, is that.
Well, but conservatively, if we get it all now and then we go, oops, we shouldn't have done that.
Yeah.
I mean, unforeseen things always come up. There will be some other project 30 days from now, 60 days from now, where we go, oh, maybe that ARPA money could be used there. It's, once there's a pot of money there, everybody starts getting ideas, and so that's all I'm really thinking of.
And I guess my biggest concern is there's still the back of my mind on how weird the weather has been already this summer. I'm just nervous about
what else will break.
Yeah.
Get broken.
I guess we're still early enough in the year that I'm like, oh, I'd like to have a little bit more in the pot to use for other things. So should something happen in the next 6 months, but so I'd hate to go all in, because it sounds to me like this would be a large part of the existing ARPA that hasn't been allocated. So I'm a little reticent to use it all in one go. So that's why I find option 2 a little bit more attractive.
Okay.
I myself, I'm in agreement with option 2. My main concern is, once again, that we're making some effort to move forward. So you guys know where I stand on sustainability and climate conditions and the changes. So TNT, I think it's a today, not tomorrow thing. And we need to make a decision to move forward, to act on it. So option 2 is, middle ground.
So I guess we need a motion. We'd like to move going forward with option 2.
I make a motion to move forward with option 2.
Okay, so we have a motion to move forward with option 2 related to our match percentage commitment for the carbon reduction program partial grant award for 2023. And I'm going to take the option to second that. Thank you. And it's with the understanding that staff, when you bring back the state municipal agreement to us for approval, we'll have a breakdown of where the funding is tentatively planned to come from. Yes?
Yes, and at that point, as a Hail Mary, you could always reject the funds at that point. So you have one more chance to think about it.
Okay, great. All right. There being no further discussion, all those in favor of approving the motion to go with option 2 for our match percentage commitment for the carbon reduction program partial grant award for 2023 signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, the ayes have it. Now, our last item is the review of the city's fund balance policy. I will ask the members and Bill, you want to proceed with this, or do we want to give this more than the 7 minutes that we would have, leaving time for a short break for those of us?
Yeah, well, so there's nothing time sensitive about this. And in fact, there are no changes recommended to the policy. We just included this as part of our plan to start reviewing financial policies on a regular basis, and it tied in with the auditor presentation. It's up to the committee's discretion if you want to discuss or hold this over.
Members, honestly, I don't have a lot of questions because I had the benefit of talking to Bill this afternoon. I was going to note for the members that Dan Foth taught us we don't need to reaffirm. That was one of his things, don't make motions to reaffirm anything. So what we could do is just, have Bill add at the bottom of the policy itself that this was last reviewed by council on this date. And I will note that I would like to see us target for our 2024 budget, hitting the policy target as Bill recommended for the general fund contingency, because we're a little light this year. Well, I guess if anyone would like to make a motion to, well, no, we don't want a motion. Yeah. Well, we need to make a recommendation to the council if we're going to go forward this tonight. Bill, is there any like a 1-minute summary that you want to give us? I'm sure we all read it.
Yeah, I think the auditors addressed as well the purpose of unassigned fund balance. We have a policy of 2 to 4 months. We've been consistent within that range. As this graph shows, we had dipped in 2018 when the city utilized a portion of the unassigned fund balance to address flooding in that year. We were able to replenish that and then have been in that 28 to 30% target. I think that's a healthy level, and I have no recommended changes there. The policy also talks about our general contingency, and that is the amount that we include within our budget each year that can be allocated at the discretion of council for unforeseen things that come up mid-year. That policy, the policy sets a target of 2/3 of 1% of the general fund budget. And as you can see, since the policy was adopted, the first 3 years, we were right on track. It dipped somewhat during the pandemic in 2020 and 2021. It's bounced back up a little bit in 22 and then a little lower in 23. So the only recommendation I had is that, my personal recommendation would be that we maintain the policy as is and make a commitment to try to fund that as the policy indicates. Or if we think that that is going to be too difficult to meet, then we should amend the policy and come up with a more realistic target.
Thank you. Well,
I guess I would just, given the information on the graph with those 2 outlying years being such strange years, I think maybe 1 more year in the current policy before we decide anything about changing it.
yeah. Okay, so with the consent of my colleagues, I'd like to propose not a motion, but I would like to report to the council because we have this item on the council agenda under miscellaneous. I'd like to report to the council that we agreed with Bill's recommendation to keep the policy unchanged for now, and also to prioritize fully funding the general contingency at our policy target in our 2024 budget. Any objections? All right, if not, then I will make that recommendation when we get to the council meeting. Okay. Who would like to make a motion to adjourn?
I will move that we adjourn.
I'll second that. There's no need to ask for discussion, we learned. So all those in favor of adjourning signify by saying aye.